We're reconvening the Planning Commission meeting for July 23rd, 2009. And we'll do a very quick roll call. And so, Ms. Rodriguez, please call the roll.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Commissioner Bartlett.
Here.
Commissioner Jacobs.
Here.
Commissioner Jostis.
Here.
Commissioner Lodge.
Here.
Commissioner White. Coming.
He's absent. He's not
Commissioner
coming back.
Thompson.
Here.
Commissioner Larson.
Here. All right. We've done our preliminary matters. And we did our public comment to the public, so that's done. We did our special work session. And now we're on to item 4 on our agenda, a consent item, which is the application of Elva Rogers for the Chevron Environmental Management Company for the Goleta Slough Reserve and Coastal Overlay Zones General Plan Designation Recreational Open Space. Mr. Justice?
Madam Chair, I move we waive the need for the staff report
Second.
on this consent calendar item.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item, item 5. Oh, sorry.
Public hearing. We have to vote on it. We just waived reading of the...
Oh, I'm sorry. Waive reading. I thought he was... Sorry, John, thank you.
Public testimony.
Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone here on this matter? Okay, presentation from the applicant. I told you to be fast. All right. Staff?
The applicant's available for questions, but
Okay.
there's no presentation.
Thank you.
Public?
Madam
No
Chair,
public comment. I'll close that.
this appears to be simply a monitoring project that looking for ground water pollution, and I think it's something that we can easily approve. So I would move approval of the mitigated negative declaration and whatever else needs to go with it. Coastal development permit. Okay.
Mr. Justice?
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. All right. Item 5, which was the application of Brett Daniels, has been postponed. Thank you. And we're on to item 6, which is the application of Lisa Plowman, and that would be for Lighthouse Road. So I'm sure we have the presentation. We have staff presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just waiting for the overhead to turn
Okay,
on.
thank you.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. The proposed project is an 8-lot subdivision located at 230 Lighthouse Road. The parcel is 1.67 acres and is located at the terminus of Lighthouse Road, immediately north of Washington School. The subject parcel is zoned E3, one-family residential, and has a general plan and local coastal plan land use designation of residential 5 units per acre. The proposal involves the demolition of existing site improvements and subdivision of the lot into 8 parcels. Vehicular access would be provided by driveways along the northern and southern property lines. A walk street and common landscaping is proposed down the center of the site. Drainage improvements and public improvements would also be installed. Construction of the individual homes is not a part of the project, although the applicants have included a condition that each residential lot would provide 1 guest parking space. The approvals required for the project are a tentative subdivision map, lot frontage modifications to allow 6 of the lots to have less than the required 60 feet of frontage on a public street. Public street frontage waivers to allow more than 2 lots to be served by a private driveway, and a coastal development permit to allow development in the non-appealable jurisdiction of the coastal zone. This slide shows the subject parcel, and this is the proposed layout of the subdivision. Proposed lot sizes would range from approximately 8,552 square feet to 9,728 net square feet. And the applicant will go into more detail about the details of the subdivision. As noted earlier, the project does require 6 lot frontage modifications because lots 2 through 7 do not have frontage on a public street. The project also requires a public street frontage waiver for that same reason. Staff is supportive of those requests because the private driveways will provide adequate access to the site. The southern driveway will provide a buffer between the school and future residences, and the lots would have minimum widths of more than 70 feet. The project does include the removal of 32 trees, 8 of which require a removal permit from the Park and Recreation Commission. Concern was raised that the proposed subdivision design unnecessarily removes trees, and that's why the Park and Recreation Commission continued the item until the Planning Commission had considered the subdivision request. The arborist report that was prepared for the site noted that all the trees are in poor to fair condition and did recommend relocation on site of only the 1 olive tree. Replacement oaks were recommended for the 1 oak tree that would be removed. And Tim Downey, the city's urban forest superintendent, is available to discuss the Park and Recreation Commission's comments in more detail. Staff does recommend approval of this project pursuant to the findings contained in the staff report and subject to revised conditions of approval that I'll talk about briefly. Staff did receive some comments from the applicant as well as comments from the Washington School Foundation, and those were related to the recommended conditions of approval. To address some of these concerns, staff has revised some of the proposed conditions and also added some new conditions. This revised set of conditions was distributed to the Planning Commission today. The specific conditions that were revised or added are shown in underline and strike through and are A1, B9, E4, A2, A5, A7, B10, B11, B12, C12, and H4. So if the Planning Commission is supportive of the project, then we can talk about those revised or new conditions in more detail if necessary. And just so you know, the purpose of the new and revised conditions is to address land use compatibility concerns with the adjacent school property, and also to address timing issues related to installation of the common improvements and also the replacement landscaping. The new conditions that address the land use compatibility issues with the school are very similar to the ones that were added to the 210 MIGS project, which you reviewed last March. The applicant has requested that condition B11 be slightly revised, and I think they will go into more detail on that. And it should be also noted that the Washington School Foundation did recommend some other conditions and changes that were not incorporated into that document, and those are outlined more fully in the Washington School Foundation's letter, which was distributed to you this afternoon. That concludes staff's report, and I can answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Presentation from the applicant, please.
Allison, can we switch the... Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Lisa Plowman with Piker Group. I'm representing Gary Roberts and the Southern California, Nevada Conference of the United Church of Christ. I'll never get that name right. That's right. I do. Thank you, Allison, for a very clear and succinct presentation. And I just want to walk the Planning Commission through the proposal. I know we've been here before twice, actually, so you have some background information on this site. The church has owned the site for a number of years, roughly 40 years, and the church operated for most of that time, and they closed it a few years ago as part of their consolidation for their membership. And the members in that church are now part of another church within Santa Barbara. And one of their main objectives when they closed the church was to come up with a concept that they felt really enhanced Santa Barbara in the local area as well as the larger community. You've seen the site, as Allison showed you. There's Cliff Drive here, and Lighthouse Road, and the school. As she indicated, the site is about 1.65 acres. The on-site uses have been the church and accessory structures. She went over the zoning, and the slope is about 3%. Some site photos. This shows Lighthouse Road and some of the single-family development. And then Lazy Acres, which backs up to Lighthouse Road, and the Shoreline Villas, which is right across the street. And then this just gives you an idea of what the surrounding land uses are. Here's Lazy Acres, here's Shoreline Villas, the school district, the project site, and then this is single-family development along Salida del Sol. History. So in January 2007, we first came to the Planning Commission with a concept that we felt was suitable for the area. It was a condominium project, thinking that this was an ideal location for infill development of attached units. It had 22 condos with 6 affordable. And in that conversation, we discovered that the Planning Commission really felt that the neighborhood was more single-family oriented, but supported the concept for including affordable units in a more single-family oriented project. So there was not a support for the rezone at that time. So we went back to the drawing board with the applicant and tried to figure out a way to incorporate affordable units into the single-family development. And we came up with a concept of creating 7 market rate lots and 3 affordable lots, and had been working with Habitat for Humanity on that concept. We also had developed a concept of a walk street at that time, which we had presented to the commission, and there seemed to be general support for that design, and overall support for the basic concepts. But there were some questions about the affordable component and whether or not those 3 affordable lots really worked in this neighborhood, and how they would be integrated, and how the homeowners associations would work together. So we went back to the drawing boards after that conceptual meeting and tried to resolve some of those concerns that the Planning Commission had. And we submitted a DART application in March of 2009 with a similar concept, having made some minor revisions to address the concerns that had been expressed. But when we submitted it, we had many conversations with staff just about the Planning Commission concepts and about their concerns, and there didn't seem to be a lot of support for the affordable housing component in the project. And as we reconsidered everything, we thought, you know what? We'd rather go to the Planning Commission with support from staff, and so we ended up removing that element, and that's what you saw before you today. Part of that was the fact that the inclusionary housing ordinance has been revised, and so now this project will ultimately contribute to the affordable housing. But that had been a very serious objective of the church. They have one of the members of that congregation is on the board for Habitat for Humanity, and they were very eager to try and work a deal, but it just seemed in this instance that it was a rather uphill battle, I think, and maybe not appropriate in some people's minds. So that was the concept that you had seen some months ago that showed the 3 lots down here. So now we have the revised 8-lot proposal, which we believe responded to the Planning Commission's concerns as well as staff's, responded to the Washington School and the Foundation's concerns about creating buffers, as well as the neighbors that are to the north. And then also we think that even though it doesn't include the affordable units as we'd hoped, it does create some community benefit in creating some opportunity for additional housing on an infill site that are near schools and services that people could walk to. The concept, as you have seen, is a pedestrian-oriented neighborhood that we think really creates a livable community where the units face one another and there's common space in between them where children can play and neighbors can come out and have conversations, and it gives more of a sense of sort of a community rather than just a standard subdivision. I'll show you the central landscaped walk street, and then, as we indicated, those driveways along the northern and southern boundary provide the buffers that had been sought. As Allison walked you through, there are the 8 single-family lots, the ranging in size from 8,500 to 9,500, development envelopes 3,000 to 4,000 square feet. We have open space areas. There's a minimum requirement for yards of 1,250 square feet. Each house would have a 2-car garage and a single guest space that would be provided in addition. We attended the Single Family Review Board, and at the time when we had the 10 lots with the 3 affordables, and they supported the overall concept of the walk street and appreciated that. They had some comments about the affordable, but in general, they liked the overall design of the subdivision. So here's the subdivision map as Allison had shown you. Here are the 8 lots. And this is a conceptual site plan that gives you an idea of what it might look like when it's built out. And the objective is that this property would ultimately be sold and that all the units would be built at one time as a standard development rather than selling off individual lots. Oops. So this shows the building envelopes for each lot as well as the open space areas that are set aside for yards. And one of the issues I think that had come up at the last concept review meeting was the neighbors along this boundary had been concerned because one of the units had been nestled up against that property line. And what we did was we flipped the unit and the open space so that we could create a buffer between those, between this house and the neighboring property. So with respect to the tree removal, one of the issues that had been discussed at the committee was the removal of the eucalyptus trees here in the southwest corner. And the primary reasons for removing the trees have to do with the fact that there's a new alignment of the sidewalk there. The sidewalk currently juts out this way, and now we're going to have to bring it in and align it with the sidewalk to the north, and that's going to result in removal of some of the trees, as well as the placement of the driveway here along the southern property boundary. There had been some concerns expressed by the school district about hazards associated with the eucalyptus trees. They're quite tall and, as we know, can be rather unsteady in high winds. And in this area right here is the entrance to the school as well as the kindergarten and play yard area. And so the school district wrote a letter to the street tree committee supporting the removal of those trees. But we also understand the desire to have trees in the developments and wanting to maintain skyline trees. And so as a way to mitigate for that loss, we had proposed a landscape plan that would be reviewed ultimately by the Single Family Design Board and approved. So here's the conceptual landscape plan that shows plantings along the property boundaries and then through the common walk street area. And this just gives you an aerial perspective of what we envision this development will ultimately look like, creating a really pleasant communal area where I think the neighbors and residents of this development would really enjoy. There's another perspective. And then just to give you an idea of how the guest parking would be associated with the garages at the rear. And here's some walk streets that I think you've seen previously, but they're used in different areas around the country and are quite successful. So with respect to conditions of approval, we had originally spoken with Allison about changes regarding timing of implementation or installation of those common area improvements. And the staff has supported those changes, so I don't want to spend a lot of time going through those conditions. But essentially, it allows for the improvements, the common area improvements, to be made prior to certificate of occupancy if all of the lots are developed together. And that really allows for efficient construction and minimum, I'm hurrying, okay, I'll wrap it up here. I think the primary condition we really want to talk about, conditions are the ones that relate to the Washington School Foundation's requests. And I've included this slide. I know it's probably hard to read, but with respect to the noise conditions, they had a series of conditions they wanted to include in the project that had been included in the Meigs Road project. And we've agreed to those in general, but we want to make sure that they're only applied to the lots 5 through 8, which are directly adjacent to the school, because we felt that those were the most critical units and that the other ones were far enough set back. The other change was they had a condition that required dampers and glass doors on fireplaces, and we thought, well, we'd be happy to consider them, but we didn't want to force that if that wasn't something that one of the residents wanted. And then with respect to a disclosure, the foundation wanted the owner to develop a disclosure statement about the Washington school activities. But we felt that it's really the school district that ought to be preparing the statement about their own activities and then provide it to the owner, because the owner doesn't have enough knowledge about what's really going on or what's planned in the future or their events. And so we tweaked the language a little bit so that the district would be providing that to the owner, and that ultimately future owners or tenants would end up having to sign a notarized document that indicates what those future activities are like, and that they have events and they may be construction at some point, so that minimizes any unanticipated conflict between the school and any future landowners. Apparently the school has had some complaints by some surrounding property owners, and they want to reduce any potential for problems. So just in conclusion, the design we believe is a bungalow-style courtyard that we think would really enhance the neighborhood, and that it responds to the concerns that had been expressed by the Commission as well as the neighborhood and staff, and hope that we've done a sufficient job to address the Street Tree Committee's concerns, and that it will be contributing to the Inclusionary Housing Fund through the payment of a fee of $144,000. And then our requested action, which is Allison has outlined for you. And we're happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you very much. I would like to, I see a few people have arrived. If you would like to speak to this item when we open public comment, which will be very soon, would you please get a green slip from the back of the room and give it to Ms. DeBusk in the front, and she'll give it to me, and you can have your say. And that being said, I will open the public hearing, and we have a speaker, and looks like maybe two. Mr. Ed Gamble.
Hi, my name is Ed Gamble, 320 Lighthouse Road. Thanks for the opportunity to address you. I'm very happy that the applicant has narrowed their focus and withdrawn other options that may have been presented in the past. I support the current one going forward. I do have one comment I want to make about the current state of disrepair of the property. I don't know how whether you've recently been there or not, but you can see that it is in horrible, horrible shape. I want to tell you about 3 things that have happened recently that I think are of importance. One is there's a massive amount of graffiti. There's a drug use. There's drug selling. There's all sorts of bad activities there. Another thing is that the lawn is greatly overgrown. It is a significant fire hazard. The grass is over 1 foot tall. There are plenty of cars that drive back there. There are plenty of people involved in there. If someone were to light a match, a cigarette, dispose of it, or if the heat from their car could cause a fire, we'd have a tragedy at Washington School and the Mesa. Also, I've recently observed people on the roof, walking on the roof, apparently enjoying the view and smoking cigarettes, as well as one of the individuals urinated off the top of the roof. So what is my point here? My point here is that we now need to move forward pretty quickly and get this property dealt with. And I would suggest to the extent possible that the current owners demolish whatever they can as soon as possible. The cost to do that would be minimal compared to any profits they're going to make in the future from selling this. And it would be generally respectful for what's been going on there for the last couple of years. Thank you. And I support the option as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Gamble. And next we have Dr. Dukes.
Good afternoon. It's exciting to see a new project going into our neighborhood. I represent the 1809 Cliff Drive Property Owners Association. I'm the president of that. And My concerns are that we have enjoyed historic views over this property for the last 21 years. And during that time period, the eucalyptus grove has grown up and obscured much of the view, and I'm happy to see that that's going to be removed. And I'm hopeful that any trees that replace that grove would be of a low-growing type that would not impede the views. I'm also concerned about the type of structures that will be constructed there. I'm concerned that if they're multi-level structures, that they're going to impede our views, and so I know that's probably not the purpose for this meeting today, but I wanted to be on record that we're concerned about that in any future discretionary meetings that are held about this project would address that issue. Perhaps we could do some story polls or something of that nature to demonstrate the height of the location of the properties so that we might be able to understand what impact it's going to have on the views. Otherwise, I'm happy to have new neighbors in the neighborhood, and we're very grateful to have such a beautiful property being built down on this current eyesore. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure that you're on the noticing for any board or commission review that this project will have. I have one other one that I received via email, and that is from Nika and Michael Gwynn, and they can't be here today, but they do live at 313 Salida del Sol, which backs onto the lighthouse property, and they want their privacy respected. Looks like that's going to happen. They also speak to connectivity from Salida del Sol through the project that they've enjoyed going through or having a passage to the shops past that. And I don't know if the applicant had proposed that or not. So, but they would like to think that they might be. They're proposing that they would like to walk through the center of the property. So, with that, any other public comment? I'll close public comment. And matters to the commission. Mr. Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a very thoughtful project, and I like to walk street. Haven't heard that term before, but that's just indicative of my not being in tune with all the latest land use design issues. But the only question I have would be directed either to the applicant or to staff regarding how drainage is treated on this particular property. Because drainage is, I understood from the staff report that it drains to the northeast. And I don't know whether there's a drainage swale along the rear of the property. I can't recall whether everything's been graded so it'll drain to the street.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Joseph, the site actually drains southeast, or southwest, sort of southeast, southwest. And so right now the way it's been designed is that some of it will come down the walk street. You'll have some drainage in that area from the northern lots, and then the southern lots will drain to a swale that will come out towards the street. And it's been, there was a drainage analysis prepared, and it's been determined to be consistent with the SWIMP requirements.
So you'll drain the site so that it goes into the three kind of parallel either walkways or driveways
Correct.
that enter the site.
Correct.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got another question for the applicant. So, Lisa, if you would, you mentioned that this was originally conceived as a Habitat for Humanity project. Is the proposal that you're planning to go forward with for Habitat for Humanity to build it out, or are you just getting the entitlements and then selling the property with the entitlements?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Thompson, Habitat actually has elected to move on to other concepts, and so this is really just a subdivision that will ultimately be sold as a package to a developer.
So the basic move now is just for the church to divest the property.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
There was an issue raised by the adjacent neighbor to continue the use of access to Lighthouse. I think that this is not a planning commission or city issue. This is something that should be worked out between that neighbor and the property owner, because that is not public access. It's only serves that particular individual. Unless that individual wants to give public access through his carport, then I don't think it's a city issue for the Planning Commission to deal with. As an aside, I'm kind of surprised at the proximity of that particular home to the lot line, to the rear lot line there. So they are very close to the property line. There were several enforcement issues raised, both in written correspondence and in public testimony today, and I'd like to ask staff, is enforcement action from staff underway? And if not, what do we have to do?
Chair Larson and Commissioner Thompson, there's no formal enforcement case that's been opened against the property at this point in time. That's something that we could begin.
Okay, that's the second part of my question. What do we have to do? I was on the property recently, within the last week, and it is a definite hazard, and something should be done, especially since it's adjacent to a school. So
We'll start
what
the
do we need to
paperwork.
do to get something started?
Chair Larson and Commissioner Thompson, I will start the paperwork and submit that as an enforcement case for them to start working on it.
Okay, thank you. As far as the project, my opinion is the project as proposed is definitely supportable, and it should be an enhancement to the neighborhood. So I would support the project as it is proposed. With the, we may want to talk about the proposed changes to the conditions of approval, but in general, I support all of the proposed changes.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge, and then Commissioner Jacobs.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd be interested in hearing what the Parks and Recreation concerns were, because it was delayed their action until we've acted on it.
Madam Commissioner, committee members, I'm Tim Downey. I'm the Urban Forest Superintendent with the Parks Division. At the time the tree removal application was submitted to Street Advisory Committee and Park and Recreation Commission, the extent of the public improvements were not determined. The concerns for the trees in question relate to those improvements. They basically, because of the construction of those improvements, will cause the trees to become unstable, which tantamounts to removing the trees. Without an action from the Park and Recreation Commission, because that would become an administrative action. The Commission postponed a decision because they felt it was premature for them to hear the tree removal applications without a surety that the subdivision was going to go through. So that was the intent in postponing the decision.
Okay, thank you. And I had another question. I just wondered how the lot size compares to the surrounding single-family areas.
Chair Larson and Commissioner Lodge, the lot sizes are relatively similar, although I would say the net size is a little bit larger because it does also include that private driveway.
And then on the walkthrough in the back, my recollection is that there is a public walkway that goes from the school to Salida del Sol. It's a paved one that's right next to the... It's on the school property, okay. But it does go between a couple of homes that front on Salida del Sol. So I'm not sure what this is like an extra walkway through the property owner right behind, but they must have, if they're right behind, they must have access to the official one, I would think. And then each of the houses would have a private yard area, the 1,250 square feet, as well as they'll have like 2 front doors, though.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Lodge, the front doors will actually be on the walk street.
Oh, they will?
Yeah, right. But they will have access from their garages and at their rear.
Okay, thank you. Those were my questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jacobs?
Thank you, Chair Larson. I find the project generally supportable. We often ask for bungalow court-like configurations, and this is like that, although they're sort of bungalows on steroids, but it is a kind of bungalow court configuration. It works for me if they're all built at the same time. I think that the condition which incentivizes that is very worthwhile. And I believe they definitely need to be built all at the same time. And given that they're likely to all be built at the same time, it starts to be, it's a little bit of a subdivision. It's a little bit like the way a condo would be built, and I think it would be appropriate for story poles to happen at a certain point so that even though it's being reviewed by Single Family Design Board, the neighbors really will be experiencing something much more like what we see in a condominium development. And so I think that it should be story poled at that point so that public comment will be accurately informed when it gets to the Single Family Design Review Board. It's kind of an odd duck in that situation. Mr. Thompson had it exactly right regarding the enforcement cases. Probably demo now is a good way to go on the property. Clear up that enforcement and demolish it, get it ready for your proposed development. I do have one question or curiosity. The streetscape will change somewhat on this piece of Lighthouse Road because of the 210 MIGS property and the proposed improvements to the school's parking lot. And have we got a sense from transportation about the continuity of the street so that all of this goes together and works well in terms of sidewalks and I'm thinking of pedestrian activity, but also cars. It's a heavily walked area. There's lots of schools, and there's a market.
Chair Larson and Commissioner Jacobs, we have been looking at both projects somewhat together. We haven't officially seen the school parking lot improvements yet, so in that sense we haven't been able to coordinate them as much as we would have liked to, but it's definitely something that we've kept in mind. As you'll see, the proposed sidewalk improvements here do need to meander to connect up with the existing improvements. It's a little bit different, but those are things that are being looked at and will be worked out even more so in the final plans. For example, that crosswalk and the that you'll see on Lighthouse right near the school, there are details associated with that that haven't been worked out yet, but they will be as the projects both move forward.
Okay, well, let's make sure that this property, as it's developed, does its part to create a nice uniform street, which of course benefits the potential residents there anyway. But I'd like to see that happen. And again, because it's an odd duck, it's going through the Single Family Design Review Board, and they don't usually think about stuff like that, so we'll be relying on staff to bring it to their attention. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Bartlett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm glad the project came back and contains most of the original qualities that we'd liked about it from the last review, and that we've resolved at least the affordable issues, and that there is a way that this project can still contribute even though it's not on site. I do have a question on the latest revisions that were made because obviously the exhibits now don't match. You mentioned that the rear, I think it was lot 4, that you flipped that configuration. I don't know if you can put that diagram up so we can understand which of these exhibits is correct so that when we make a motion, at least we know what we're approving.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bartlett. So yeah, this indicates the switch that we did, the flipping of the the building envelope, and then the private yard area.
Right, so it looks like the schematic site plan and the tentative map then are correct. It's only the landscape plan that is...
Yes, I noticed that, and actually we corrected it for the presentation, but we will fix that before we go back
Okay, and then
for
a
approval.
quick question while you have the diagram up. Is there any reason that you wouldn't consider flipping lots 2 and 3 so that it looks like the south side where all the private yard spaces are separate rather than lots 1 and 2 sharing adjacent?
Oh, it was views between the buildings.
Was that what...
That was one of the issues. Yeah, we wanted to try and stagger the units as much as
So
possible.
you're looking across to open space on the other side of the walk street?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chair Larson and Commissioner Bartlett, one thing I would like to point out, although the applicant has submitted these schematic site plans, the building envelopes proposed are simply the setbacks, and so there is nothing that would dictate that this particular layout be the one that moved forward, unless it were to be conditioned as such.
So the depicted open spaces aren't really part of this. It's only the setbacks within each lot.
That's correct. 1,250 square feet of open space is required, but which side of the lot it goes
Okay.
on is still open to interpretation unless it's something that you condition into the project.
Great.
And I think we would be open to having a condition that indicated that the open spaces were provided along that western property,
Right, well,
or
I-
eastern property boundary.
I think, we all like the concept, so we'd like to make sure there's some assurance that this is what's going to come back even, down the road. Who knows how long that would be. So,
Yeah, and we're open to that.
okay, and I would certainly be able to support the project as well.
Thank you, Ms. Lodge.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Motion? Oh, my comments? I think it looks, first of all, I appreciate the opening of corridors for view, at least that. So I'm inclined to say I would like to have that good neighbor policy go forward. It's rare and it's very in keeping with your philosophy. So thank you, and also appreciate the rearrangement of the sites themselves to provide a little more privacy to the Salida del Sol neighbor. And I think that it's going to be a nice welcome to the neighborhood. I hope I don't see anything like a gate for access on there or anything like that, that it stays open. And I really, really am looking forward to the cleanup of the property, because I was out there too and it is a mess. So that's something that shouldn't delay. And with that, those are my comments. I'm looking forward to enhanced lighting on the street and definitely a plus for the streetscape and a nice completion of that area. And that being said, Mr. Thompson?
Madam Chair, for staff, did you say, Allison, that you wanted us to discuss the proposed changes to the conditions of approval? Or are you happy with them as you proposed
Madam Chair and Commissioner Thompson, if you support the conditions as the revised conditions as we've given them to you, then I would just also like you to comment on whether or not you support the additional modifications recommended by the applicant.
I don't see a lot of difference between what you presented to us and what the applicant had up there. In both cases, it says the language for the disclosure shall be provided by the school district. So, I mean, the wording was slightly changed from what the applicant put up there.
And staff is supportive of the applicant's recommended changes. It's just that we didn't have them in time to give to you.
So you basically incorporated what they proposed. Well, then if there are no other questions, I'll move to approve the project, making the findings in the staff report and subject to the conditions of approval as in the revised Exhibit A presented here for conditions. And with the inclusion in whichever is the appropriate place about design components of future residents, that the open yard areas on the two eastern lots be at the property boundary side.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. So Ms. Lodge, second. All in favor?
Madam Chair?
Oh, Mr. Justice.
I just want to make a comment here. I'm going to vote in favor of the motion, but I just think using language like consider including fireplaces is not really a condition. It doesn't really give me a warm and fuzzy as far as what the intent of the condition is. But I'm happy to vote in favor of the project.
Thank you. Yes. Ms. Jacobs.
Under discussion, I'm also in support of the motion, but I wonder if the motion maker would consider adding a story pole requirement to condition A5, which is the point at which the project goes to a single-family design review board. And I'm not hearing warm fuzzies about that, so I will support it as is, but I do have a concern that as this works its way through the process, that consideration of the project as a whole will not happen on its own.
I would support that.
I'd be open to some more discussion about it, but I would also, in response to Commissioner Justice's comment, my motion does not include A7C4 about consider including, and the language in the COA does not include that language. It just says they shall have. As far as the story poles, we typically don't require story poles for single-family residences. It's pretty onerous for a single-family development because it is expensive.
Could it include as minimal or some kind of or at the discretion of the Single Family Design Review Board so that they have an option to think about it? I agree, full story poles through the whole site would be quite difficult, but it does seem that something would be appropriate given the size of the actual development, how much square footage is going to be built all at one time.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Vincent.
While I don't have the Single Family Design Board guidelines in front of me, I believe that the most recent update to them did deal with the issue of visual representations, whether they be computer animation or they be done by story poles. And so I think the design board does have a tool to deal with this subject. I just can't remember exactly how it deals with it right now. But at the same time, I think that it's been my experience lately that the Single Family Design Board's pretty well equipped, even with the personality, with the personalities involved on the board, to make sure that these kinds of subjects are dealt with when it comes to them.
I'm thinking more of the public communication aspect of it. Does single family, do they make site visits? I don't think they do. And I think that how the neighborhood will understand the project is, it's different when it's a planning commission project versus when it's a single family design review board project, because single family design review board, really, it just kind of happens. You get noticed, it's noticed, and people know about it. And I guess an option might be that we ask for a neighborhood meeting or something. I just really think that the neighborhood needs to have a more comprehensive idea of this project than is the standard for single family design review.
All right.
Anybody else agree? Because if not, then I will withdraw my comments.
I don't disagree. This is it's not a small development in the neighborhood. It's a large addition. Mr. Thompson.
As the maker of the motion, I would entertain requesting that the applicant provide computer depiction when it is brought to the Single Family Design Board. It's a notice meeting. There are notice in the neighborhood. So if someone really wants to see what it is, they can go and get the single-family design board depictions, and so I would agree with that. But I think that a full-blown story poles would be a very expensive proposition for a residential project.
Mr. Bartlett?
Thank you,
for
Madam
your
Chair.
patience.
First, I have a question. I want to be sure with the maker of the motion, are conditions A7 and B11 with the applicant's revisions included in your motion?
I
or
did
none?
I did not include any of the applicant's revisions in my motion. I included the revised conditions of approval that we presented here.
Would you consider A7 and B11? Those are the ones relating to the school. I understand or at least
B11 was already included in here.
No, it's not, actually.
No?
Yeah, there's a...
Ms.
There is a
Jacobs?
significant- I'm sorry. There is a significant difference between what the applicant is proposing
Right.
on B11 and what we have before us in our revised conditions.
And on A7 as well, because it's only the 4 lots adjacent to the school as opposed to the ones that aren't near the school.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Bartlett and Jacobs, my reading of the B11 as given to us and what's up on the board is very similar in intent, so I don't see a significant issue here, and that's why I didn't include the applicant's wording.
Okay. And then as to the story pole discussion, and this is an application for a subdivision of lots. It's not an application for any structures. So at this point, I don't see the reasoning for story poles. I mean, that would be a future application. I mean, it may be 8 single-family or 1-story homes that comes before us. We don't know. So
Yeah,
I
that's
wouldn't
true.
support the story poles at this point on the subdivision only.
Your depiction gets part of the job done, so that's... I can withdraw that concern.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Justice?
I have nothing else to add other than, we always get tangled up in this private view issue, and private views are off the table as far as we're concerned. So I think the motion as structured is adequate, and I would call the question.
All right. We have a motion and a second. So, and I have Mr. Thompson's light on. No, I don't. I have Ms. Jacobs. Okay, we're okay. A motion and a second. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. You have your subdivision, and it's appealable to City Council within 10 days. And our next item this puts us on to our administrative agenda, which is item 7 on our agenda.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
I'm going to need to excuse myself. I've got another commitment that I need to make.
I
So
understand. Thank you.
Reluctantly need to leave the room. Thank you.
Thank you for attending today. We appreciate your input. Good fishing. Good luck. Yes.
Since we're at that point, I will be recusing myself from the Natural History Board, Natural History Museum decision in that my husband is a member of the board of the museum.
One,
So I hope we don't have anybody else leaving, so we keep our
That's
quorum.
right. That's right. All right. Thank you. You'll be missed. So that being done, we'll go on to our administrative agenda, and the first item on it is an item of substantial conformance for 810 Bond Avenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let's go to HM Bond. Here we go. So, give you a quick overview of HM Bond. It was heard by your commission on September 18, 2008, for a condo conversion. At that time, your commission asked for a open space area to include a tree being planted. At the hearing, the dilemma was brought up that the slab for the parking area is a uniform slab, a monolithic slab, and that might be difficult to punch through the hole based on soil, groundwater issues, as well as exposed rebar. The project went back to ABR for consideration in May of this year. At that time, the applicant came forward with more evidence that punching through the concrete slab would compromise the integrity of the slab. So the ABR went ahead and continued the item, and the applicant is back before you for substantial conformity to not put in the tree and eliminate the line that says, except that the final design shall include a 24-inch box tree planted in the ground. So that's what we're asking for, is to eliminate that line. And so right now a shot of the parking area and the area that they want to go ahead and do some landscaping on the paved area and also add some more amenities. So I'm going to turn it over to the applicant agent to talk a little bit about it.
Thank you very much. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Surely. My name is Steve Oroz. I'm agent for Peter and Sylvia Curls, the property owner. And thank you for Peter for pitching in today. He wasn't our normal planner. Our planner's on vacation today. He summarized how we got to here, but I just wanted to amplify a few things and then get into our proposal today and why we feel that we can still meet the intent of the condition without putting a hole in the middle of the concrete. When we went through the project conditions here at this board, we did hear the need for shading. We did hear the need for additional open space. And the plan that was ultimately approved included those items. We did have some concern at that time, and we did express it about the integrity of the slab. We did provide ABR a letter from the building contractor that built the slab and is warrantying the work, supporting that question. And we were starting to get, as working with ABR and looking at the landscaping and the open space area and the usability and viability of it, ABR started to agree with us that a tree could be placed somewhere else on the site in the vicinity of this open space area. But we said we'd like to work with you, but we have this condition that we need to get modified or somehow a determination made that what ABR is working out with us is okay with the Planning Commission. So that's the reason why we're here. We have been working with ABR. We did hear a lot of good comments from them. We do have a plan that we're looking at taking back to ABR once we get past this meeting today. It's not final, but it starts to address some of the concerns that ABR had regarding this open space. So what I'd like to do is have David Black of David Black Landscape Architecture show you the picture of what we're heading.
Thank you.
And go from there.
Great. Mr. Black? Trying to get through this kind of in a smart fashion here. It's the end of a long day.
Can we use the overhead projector to project the plan? We were ready for a lunch meeting, which was kind of more informal. So if that can get set up, that'd be
Well,
great.
actually, we could probably look at it
Okay.
I've got it on a board.
here, or, I mean, this ordinarily would be a lunch meeting, so, you know, I know you're not prepared with big.
Commissioner Larson, we have it on a board here, so, yeah.
Can we, is
Madam
everybody
Chair,
in
do
agreement we
have
can
a-
do that?
Do we also have a full site plan that we can project just to, no, it's just this corner that the ABR is looking at?
Correct, yeah. This is the corner here, site plan.
Okay, thanks.
I know this is sort of unusual, but you mind if I sort of come up there and it's up to you. You know, do we have a
And you can stand behind me and use the mic. Here. Yeah.
Get that thing.
This is adaptive reuse of this room.
Come over to
I want to show some pictures of you. Not like that?
No, not at all.
We're all fine.
If this were being done at lunch, we'd be gathered around a table. So we'll just use that approach.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your consideration. So we sort of took the approach that what we are trying to do, based on your input and that of the ABR, is to kind of create a very reasonably nice passive open space in an area which is essentially concrete. It's a monolithic concrete slab has been described, and so we brought some ideas before the ABR, and they had some comments, and there were some things they liked and some things that they would prefer to have us change. And so this plan represents our best effort at those changes. Now, the one thing that it doesn't do is show a specimen tree in the concrete deck, and we've explained why that is. They're just technical reasons why that's not possible. So that being said, and one of the suggestions that ABR made was that perhaps the tree, a specimen tree, could be planted outside the perimeter wall. And I've got a photograph here. Essentially, this is where we are. This is Nopal Street here, shot that way. So there are two existing specimen jacaranda trees here and here, and they were suggesting perhaps we could plant it in this narrow planter just outside the wall, which is where Steve is pointing now. I think, frankly, that it provides, at least goes a long way to providing some shade for that area. But I'm also sort of depending on the opportunity for maybe some nice patio furniture with an 8 or 10 foot umbrella, and at that location. And to be honest with you, the site is they've done a very nice job just planting the entire site. This is the Bond Street frontage. It's pretty lushly planted, and here's another shot of the patio space. Mr. Corrales has actually gone ahead and tried to make some improvements, and so what we are trying to do is improve on that. This is just a sort of an oblique angle there. But so what we are looking to do then is actually, and this is that direction of ABR's, is kind of expand this paved area, if you will. So essentially what we've done is this triangle adjacent to this parking stall, and we've got a handicap zone here, but that would be filled in. And then here's another angle looking towards Nopal Street. So this whole area would be paved. And then because we're basically dealing with trying to create some greenery on a hard concrete deck, we had a couple of different ways to go. There was the opportunity to do pots with lattice and vines on them. And to be honest with you, while I think it's probably a fine idea, I think ABR was looking for an opportunity to create a little bit more green separation, if you will, from the parking, more continuous and more definitive separation from the parking area. So what we're proposing as part of this plan then, as described on this plan, is, and this is just sort of a little mock-up, if you will, we can get these raised redwood box planters. We probably have to line them and waterproof them appropriately. But they would basically be along the perimeter there, along that side and there, with an opening to get in them from the parking area. And on top of this, we'd have these sort of prefabricated lath screens, if you will, and we can grow vines up on them and kind of create a nice sort of green enclosure for that space. And in addition, we could do the pots as they're shown there, and a bench down at the one end there. And everything else you see, for the most part, is existing planting outside of the one proposed canopy tree. We've got a large Teresa tree here, the two jacarandas, and then Metrosideros up there. In addition, we would show two box specimens, although they're going to have to stay in boxes at those locations. And I think that was part of the condition, original condition from this body. But again, we can't penetrate the concrete, but we can put them in boxes, and we can get some significant size plants there. So, and then with, frankly, I feel that with a large umbrella and provide the kind of shade I think that you were looking for, and then with the greenery surrounding it, and then the canopy tree, which will eventually get up and over the wall, but frankly, I'm not sure it's altogether necessary because we've got a pretty good-sized tree here, but be that as it may, we can have two. I think given the constraints, I think we've come up with a pretty nice solution in terms of creating a nice sort of green passive space for the benefit of the residents there.
And it's addressing what ABR was.
Yes, that's what ABR is. We're addressing their comments essentially, and so short of putting a tree in the deck, I think we've come up with a viable solution, and that's our presentation.
Question.
Questions?
Was there any consideration of an arbor structure, or are you in the setbacks and that makes it a diabolical problem? It would be appropriate with this building.
I can't say that we've thought about it, and I can't say that it's not possible. I'm not sure. I mean, it's just an overhead structure, and I just kind of, it's not going to provide any more opportunity for planting. Planting's going to have to come out of boxes and
there's a lot of shade from the existing tree now, because since the sun is south-facing with the building here, and in the afternoon with the other trees, it's fairly shaded.
I think the advantage of something mobile like an umbrella is that in the winter months, when you want some sun, you can either remove it or put it down, whereas a trellis, you're going to have constant shade.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Thompson.
Point of order here. We're not being asked to redesign this. We're being asked to eliminate one specific line about penetrating the concrete. We're getting into ABR's work here, and that's not appropriate. We were asked to eliminate one specific line in the conditions of approval as a substantial conformance.
So let's do it. What do we need to do? How about any further discussion? Let's do that. Any further discussion? All right.
Do you need a motion, Mr. Buss?
Madam Chair, we're just looking for a recommendation from your board. Really, the question before you is, absent of putting a tree in the ground, is the applicant showing good faith to offset that condition by eliminating that line? And then if you feel like generally, they're going that direction, then off we go to ABR for, their detail.
Right.
Madam Chair, I'd recommend you have a motion to remove the line from your condition, just so that it's clear in your record.
All right. Thank you. May I entertain
I
a
would
motion?
move to eliminate the subject line from the conditions of approval.
Second.
As being in substantial conformity.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have a motion by Mr. Thompson, a second by Commissioner Bartlett. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you for your time this afternoon.
All right, that being completed, we'll go to our next, which is 2559 Puesta del Sol. Also a substantial conformance determination. This would be the Museum of Natural History.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, before you is a substantial conformity for the Natural History Museum. Just a quick overview before the applicant steps in. Right now, developed on this site is approximate 700 square foot garage that has not been used for a number of years, as you can see in this condition it's in right now. And the request would be that this would be demolished and replaced with a 648 square foot structure that would house up to 6 raptors. And as part of a nonprofit based out of Ojai, that basically they take in injured birds, and usually they can't be released back into the wild. And this will be another site in which the birds would live out their life. They take the birds, the volunteers for Eyes in the Sky take the birds out to schools and onto the Natural History Museum ground as kind of a show and tell, basically. I came before your commission last summer with the butterfly exhibit, and your commission was very clear that they'd like to see an updated master plan So there'll be a brief explanation about where we are right now in the process of the master plan. In a nutshell, the museum has done a lot of community outreach to start formulating ideas about where they want to go for the master plan. I've had a couple of public meetings, and I'll be coming back and meeting with staff this fall. So this is kind of a quick background on the master plan. To conclude, the project has been before HLC. A historic structure report was prepared and determined that this is not a historic resource. And in fact, the fire department has condemned the building. So it does have to go either way. And finally, this is not a public exhibit. So it's not an additional attraction to the museum. So we have a couple of folks here that are here for questions, or would you like to add anything?
If you have materials, you'll have to bring them up, probably right through this gate here, because typically we do this around a table at lunchtime. Everybody at home who wonders what we do at lunchtime, this is part of it.
Okay.
So we gather around the table and we look at these items kind of almost informally that have to do with, thanks. With a little change to a project that's, okay, yep, there you go.
Hi, my name's Gary Robinson. I'm the Facilities Director at the Natural History Museum. And we have been working with this nonprofit organization, Eyes in the Skies, which is an offshoot of the Audubon Society. You can come any weekend and see the volunteers here with the birds. The birds, this is not a rehab facility. The birds are kind of like long-term residents of this. Currently, they're housed in temporary conditions at rental property, and they are in jeopardy of being, bolted out of there almost at any time. We had looked at for several sites around the museum to put what is called a muse, or this facility. It so happened the issue of this dilapidated building came up in front of the fire department, and the two coincided very well. As Peter mentioned, it's not planned to be a public exhibit. There will be no directions as how to get to the muse. The birds will come out of this holding facility and be brought out onto the developed museum grounds where the public goes now. And it's basically a one-for-one. We worked very hard with the HLC to make sure that it was consistent with the surrounding buildings and had the same architecture. In fact, it even reflects the same roof style and everything. There, at maximum, there are 2 individuals that will service the birds every day, care and feeding, and that'll be every day throughout the year. And primarily during the weekdays, the birds do go out to schools. And you've probably read in the paper that Max, the most famous of them all, is an owl that goes up and fosters other owlets and brings them up to fledging.
Thank you very much. Any questions? All right. Any comments? Can we entertain a motion then? Ms. Lodge? Mr. Thompson?
Madam Chair, I make a motion to find that this meets the level of substantial conformance required.
Second, please.
Second.
Thank you very much. We have a motion by Ms. Lodge and a second by Mr. Thompson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And to continue with our administrative agenda, we will now do committee and liaison reports. I'll do the staff hearing officer report. I have two meetings to report on. And one, the first one, I'm looking for the date of the meeting, July 6th. We had 3 T-Fire mods, which were all approved. And One was for a retaining wall to support a neighbor's property, and that wasn't a problem. And the last project was a 3-unit condo on Wentworth, a small workforce type unit. I didn't stamp those yet. Just what we need, no mods involved. And then the later one in July, the 21st, the 4 projects that required mods. One was a T-fire rebuild. All 4 mods were approved. There was also a approved modification for an open yard space and a TSM finding, and that, looking, I don't have the address for that. But anyway, that was approved. So the T-fire rebuilding is coming along, and they're coming through. And that's that report. The HLC had on the agenda the Children's Museum, and if you get a chance to watch the rebroadcast, it's very interesting. And that's that report. So anybody else have a committee or liaison report? Mr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought maybe we should at least report on the Planning Commissioners Training Seminar that Commissioners Lodge, Larson, and myself attended last week in Los Angeles. And it was, I think it's definitely exceeded our expectations. I think all the topics were good. We had 4 sessions, one on the California Environmental Quality Act, mitigation, which was quite informative, and we all got great booklets to sort of guide us with our future considerations. And we had another presentation on transportation demand management, which was, I think, pretty informative as well. The third presentation was on complete streets, which is very similar to some of our discussions we've been having on how to really activate our streetscapes in our downtown. So I think that's very timely that we were able to take part in that. And then the last one was quite apropos in its timing, and it was all about the Planning Commissioner and our role with affordable housing, which was pretty much a carry-on of our morning session. So I think these were timely topics, and I know I got a lot out of it, and I'm sure you did as well, and I'm appreciative that the Commission was able to go on this excursion. So that's it.
Commissioner Lodge.
I just want to add that I concur with the comments that Mr. Bartlett made, but it was nice to see that at least 3 of the photographs of good examples in complete streets were from Santa Barbara.
That's true. It was great, sitting there looking at the slide saying to yourself, whoa, I've been there. Usually it's a place I'd like to go, and it was. I was so excited.
And to meet the fellow commissioners from the City of Carpinteria.
Yeah, that was great. That was really terrific. It was a wonderful event, and I really appreciated the opportunity to go. We all did, knowing that the budgets are slim. Thank goodness it was not expensive. And with that, our other item is the draft minutes and resolutions. It would be the draft minutes of June 18th. Do we have enough people left to do it in terms of input, or should we? What do you think?
Perhaps the Secretary could check and see if.
Pardon?
If we 4 were the ones were all there.
All commissioners were present on that day, so we do have a quorum for the minutes.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I have a couple of corrections on
Ms. Lodge?
Page 4, the first line. It says Mr., and then there's a blank. I mean, it just says Mr. and goes on without.
I believe it was Mr. Appleton, wasn't it?
That I don't remember, but okay. And then on page 9, oh dear, I didn't print this out, and I just noted it. It refers to a Dr. John Ackerman, spelled AC, that was spelled on the minutes ACH, and it's ACK. It's just a correction of the spelling.
Anything else? Anyone else?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
On page 3 of the minutes, there's a paragraph describing my comments concerning the Coastal Act definition of development. I have some language that will simplify and clarify my statement regarding that. Basically, just replacing the sentence with, Mr. Vincent explained that the definition of development under the Coastal Act includes the construction and demolition of structures, and that the definition is intentionally broad in order to cover the range of activities that may impact coastal resources.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent. Do you need Mr. Vincent to give you a copy of that, or you got it?
I've got it.
You got
I
it.
have it.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Bartlett.
I have some revisions on page 3 under the commissioner comments. Number 1 at the very end should be feel rather than feels. Just drop the S. We already got the comment on page 4 about Mr. Appleton. On page 7, the first motion at the bottom, it should be slightly revised to say uphold the appeal, comma, eliminate the word to, and then just adopt the mitigated negative declaration. And on page 11, my comments under number 3, the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th line down, where it talks about in the middle of the street, but suggested that should say zones include, and eliminate the word they. And the next line, at least all the lots facing the street, and then it should say to make cohesive neighborhoods, period. Further down in the paragraph, the line that starts, as part of the adaptive management, need to monitor housing, jobs, and balance, but concerned that not having resource availability would become a planning tool. And then in the next sentence, would like to see economy played stronger in the goals with implications identified, period. And the next sentence suggests that the general plan, you can eliminate the word wording and just leave it as general plan be worded, and then the rest is correct. And that's it.
That's it. Okay, thank you. Could I have a...
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Mr. Thompson and a second by Mr. Bartlett. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. And then we are going to need a resolution number 027-09, 2215 Edgewater Way. Anything
Madam
about
Chair?
that? Yes.
On page 3 of the resolution, under condition B1, which is the recorded conditions of the approved development, I would recommend that we mirror the language of the motion verbatim that you just approved in that approved development, so that that the approval includes permitting as built on grade steps and a modification to allow a fence and hedge within 10 feet of the front lot line at a location of the owner's election, up to a maximum height of 5 feet or the height of the existing fence located at 2211 Edgewater, whichever is lower.
Thank you. Do we need a motion for that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Corrections.
Okay. Anybody, any other corrections? All right.
I make a motion to approve resolution number 027-09 with the modifications to item B1 as outlined by Mr. Vincent.
Second.
Thank you. That's motion by Mr. Bartlett, second by Mr. Thompson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Motion carries. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you, Commission. Thank you, staff. Good job.